Are you being compromised by the crazy markets in crypto? If so, this show is for you. Welcome to Crypto for Christians. My name is Alex. I'm a crypto enthusiast. With me, as always, is Pastor Rick. And today we thought we would talk about the craziness of crypto markets, what we've been seeing lately in the markets, and the ups and the downs that everybody who gets into this space has to get accustomed to. Rick, we've already talked a lot about crypto markets and how vexing they are for most folks. One of the reasons that these markets are so volatile, there are several different reasons. One of them is that markets have a very hard time pricing innovation. The implications of some of these projects are so profound and so far-reaching that you can easily imagine an incredibly high value for some of these projects. Cardano is one of these, and everybody who watches this show knows that we love Cardano. And sure enough, the ambitions of the program are staggering. They want to become the interface for all transfers of value in the world and for the benefit of humanity, I should add. On the other hand, how do you price something like this? And so the crypto markets, can look at it this way or look at it this way, and all this can change in a very short period of time. Rick, what you and I talked about before the show was giving our Christian audience a bit of more background about what they can expect to find out in the crypto information space about markets. If folks are watching other crypto content creators, plenty of them will be showing charts and graphs about how the prices move. And then, of course, there are the inevitable predictions about what's going to happen next in crypto. And Rick, as you know, I have some pretty strong feelings about this, and I think you do too. And so I want everybody to get ready for us both to weigh in on what we think about the many prognosticators out there who are hoping to tell you what they think about what's going to happen in the markets next. Now, before we get any further into this, Rick, since we're talking about markets, we probably better remind people that we are not financial advisors. We do not give financial advice or investment advice, and that no one should really take what we have to say as impetus for making specific investments. We really strongly encourage people to consult their investment professionals. And if they do decide to get into crypto, to make it part of a really reasonable financial portfolio. And in fact, that's the way we practice ourselves. Neither one of us are somehow all in on crypto or something like that. We're both pretty responsible about these things. On the other hand, there are interesting opportunities that we certainly don't want Christians to miss out on. And that brings us back to the crypto markets. So first and foremost, there's a whole lot of videos out there on YouTube and other places that involve something called technical analysis. And the concept of technical analysis is that you can look at the history of a chart and then determine, based on the shape of those lines, what's going to happen next on the chart. I love this idea. I think it's a really neat idea. Unfortunately, it's a very unreliable idea. And what I mean by that is that history is, past performance is actually not a predictor of future performance. And every investment has to state that explicitly to be legal in the United States. They need to tell you up front that just because the line is going this way doesn't mean that it's not going to come straight down. And Rick, I had a very vivid experience of this in May of 2021, just a few months ago, when I was watching quite a lot of technical analysis, and all the technical analysts, every single one, on I believe it was May 14th, was talking about how Bitcoin prices were going to go straight up, all these other crypto prices were going to go straight up, and that now was the last best chance to throw whatever money you could find into the crypto markets before the next upward explosion. And I mean to say, I probably watched 3 or 4 different technical analysis channels saying exactly the same thing, even sometimes for similar reasons, looking at the shapes on the graph and showing the trajectory and all of this nonsense. Well, as you know, the very next day, the crypto markets crashed by at least 50%. And then the day after that, it crashed another 30%. So people's investments were down, by 50, 60, 70%. And for the people that unfortunately bought into the technical analysis on that particular day, they got hit the hardest. And so I certainly want to make sure our listeners and our viewers know that technical analysis is not as reliable as they would like it to be. And what you'll notice is that a lot of the technical analysts learned that lesson. They didn't stop doing the technical analysis, but you'll notice they always say, and from here, it could either go up or it could also go down. They're always careful to cover both of their bases because they know that that's the truth and that it really is hard to look at past performance and judge future performance from it. Now, Rick, I know you've got your own ideas on this. I'd love to hear what you think about, markets in general, interacting with markets, and of course, the inevitable desire to predict what's going to happen next in a market.
Sure thing, Alex. I appreciate being here today with you today and always love our discussions. And it's interesting when you were talking, I thought about someone that I used to listen to discussing technical analysis and markets and those kinds of things and what you should do. And it was always interesting to me because he would say, now this could happen. And then he would sort of turn around and say, well, or the exact opposite could happen. And so that way, no matter what happened, he was always right. And he could always say, see, I told you that's what was going to happen. And so he kind of discounted the fact that he had told us that both could happen. So anyway, the point is that, we really have to deal with uncertainty in our lives in general. None of us really know what the future is going to bring. And of course, the Bible tells us exactly that in Ecclesiastes, and it's, it's chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. It says this, and think about the markets when you listen to these verses. Fools base their thoughts on foolish assumptions, so their conclusions will be wicked madness. They chatter on and on. No one really knows what is going to happen. No one can predict the future. So those two verses should be put up on every site that does technical analysis. They should just look at that and think about it while they're getting ready to talk about what they know is going to happen in the future. Now, I am certainly someone who's studied technical analysis a good bit, and I understand it, and I know a lot about it actually, and it's very interesting, it's intriguing. But what I've found is that as I've watched more and more different people discussing, it seems like to me that the people who really do well in investing don't necessarily believe that they know what's going to happen. They get some good ideas about it, but the main thing that they look at is where the price is and where value is. Because a lot of times with technical indicators, people use them, and a lot of them, most of them really are, what they call lagging indicators, that they are looking at past data. And so the further back you go with that past data, the less likely it is to influence where the price is going to go. And really the only thing we ever really know about price in a market is where is it right now? And whether it's going to go up or down in the next 5 minutes or the next 5 years, really honestly, no one knows. And that is because of this Bible verse. No one can predict the future. Now, there are ideas and trends, and if you look back at most markets over the last number of decades, really have generally tended to go up. And so if people always say, oh, if you had invested so much money back in 1970, now you'd be sitting on this huge stake. Well, sure, if you have that much money to put in and not be concerned about it at all for the next 50 years, then fine, that's great. And if you can do that, go right ahead. And that's really actually something that, we've talked about before, is the idea of patience and having a long time horizon. If you have patience and you recognize, I'm not going to take this money out now, just because it goes up a little bit. Or like we've said before, go ahead and take back your initial investment. And once it doubles or triples, if that happens, and then feel free, because you just won't have to worry about it. That's all quote unquote free money at that point. You didn't really, you got your initial investment back. So whatever happens with that other investment, then you're good to go. Well, what we have to recognize too, Alex, is that individual companies, like say you're investing in the stock market, individual companies can and do, their stock does go to zero. This has happened many times, and sometimes the stock that seems to be doing the best can immediately just tank and lose all of its in value. We can talk about the Enron debacle and long-term capital management. That's just a couple of examples where you see these companies that seemed like they were doing so well, and for whatever reason, whether it's fraud or just poor judgment, they end up in essence losing everything. And so
this very same thing can happen to any given cryptocurrency.
Right.
Cryptocurrency is backed by even less than corporations could be backed by. And so the markets can be very thin and very fragile. So I'm glad you brought that up, Rick.
Yeah, and again, like you said, the liquidity is always a factor. And that's why some people, some very intelligent investors who have done very well over a long period of time by choosing certain companies and investing in certain ways, their general advice to the general public is just invest in indices, whether it be the S&P or one of those, and just invest in that, and then you've got a much more balanced portfolio, just because what you're investing in is a larger number of companies. And since they replace the ones that start to do poorly, an indice, or an index can never really likely go to zero, right?
Right.
I mean, it might go a
Right.
but it's unlikely that it would be almost impossible for it to go to actual zero. So
that's right.
That's just, again, that's not investment advice. That's just people like Warren Buffett and other very well-respected investors say things like that, and many people, that's a great idea. It's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, for the bulk of your portfolio, you might think to do that, and then, like we've talked about, take a very small amount and say, well, let's just invest some of it into the crypto space and just see what happens. And then if it does explode, you can say, wow, that's really great, but don't have that FOMO and say, oh, I wish I'd invested all my money into it, because really you don't want to do that. That is definitely not the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly right. And everything you're talking about is very applicable to cryptos. In some ways, cryptocurrencies are much more fragile than many corporations because they don't actually generate money in that sense. Your commentary about the index fund is very important. And these currently there isn't much in the way of really solid crypto index funds or their equivalents. However, if we were to talk to our viewers about what would we recommend, it's what we've recommended all along, is to get involved in a variety of these crypto projects at different levels, at layer 1 and also at layer 2, meaning smaller cap coins that are built on some larger layer 1 projects, and possibly dabbling in the high risk world of NFTs. Once you're buying NFTs, you have to remember you're pretty much buying art or baseball cards or something like that. It's more like something that we hope you get some enjoyment out of, whether or not it goes up in price. These aren't investments in the traditional sense. Maybe more like buying a piece of art that you just want to enjoy for your own purposes. And then if it goes up, that would be good. But the idea of buying a basket of currencies instead of putting all your eggs in one basket is really a good idea for sure. And keeping in mind that these cryptos can be very, very volatile, and volatile to the downside, because once money gets sucked out of them, there's nothing underneath. There's no buildings, there's no, there's no nothing that they really have to prop up their value. So they can lose value very, very quickly. Now, as we also know, they can also gain value very, very quickly. And one of the things we've talked about before is we really highly recommend that our viewers have a preset plan where they've made an agreement with themselves and possibly an accountability partner to sell off a portion if a very large gain is realized in the crypto. It's very hard to sell high. The excitement level in the chatterverse around crypto is always at its peak when prices are highest. You'll hear lots of crypto experts talking about how, oh yeah, an all-time high, which is setting the stage for the moon. It's very hard to sell in the midst of that type of excitement. And having a good plan ahead of time makes a whole lot of sense.
Right.
So
I would just like to jump in there, Alex, and say that to me, if you brought this up earlier and then just now, probably one of the most reliable indicators that there is that when everyone is saying that it's going to continue to go up, that might be the right time to sell, because at that point, it's really likely that there will be at least a decline. And then you can think about getting back in at a lower level again and then starting again. But now, again, that's not investment advice. That's just when you see everyone saying that there's nowhere else to go but up, then it's very likely that that's not true. It's just the way of crowds. If you study the psychology of crowds, that's that's something actually our viewers should investigate if they're interested. That tells you a lot about the way the stock market and crypto markets works, especially because it's a herd mentality, and sadly sometimes they technically really just run over the cliff, and fall, and people get hurt. So if you can understand that psychology of crowds, then when you start to see things going on in both those markets, then you can say, oh, okay, that's what's really happening. Typically, when people are hearing about it, in a sense, it might already be too late to jump into it. You might it's best to kind of hold back and say, well, I'll see what happens over the next few months. And that's where, again, dollar cost averaging really works well. You end up maybe buying some at the peak, but you also end up buying some right after the crash. And so you're mixing up your investment there. And then, that's one of the reasons that does work so well.
That's right. And as you know, Rick, I'm really hoping to see a lot of Christians prosper in this space. Right. And hoping, for example, very much as you know, that we get a lot more Christian-themed NFTs in the space. And you and I have been talking about producing some of those ourselves, just to kick off the movement. By no means do I hope to be some central source of Christian-themed NFTs, but if it's up to us to kick off that movement, then we're going to step up and take that action for sure. If that's our calling, we'll answer that call. It's also true that I love to believe that Christians may be well suited to dealing with some of the craziness that happens in the markets, in part because we're more accustomed to being in the world, but not of the world. And so we can be in the market, but not necessarily of the market, to the extent that we get caught up in all of the chaos and so on. I have this vision, this belief, I have this vision. I'm picturing Christians being able to notice their profits accumulating and taking some profits reasonably as the crazy markets continue to go on. It is not my belief that anybody's going to hit the tops or always know where the bottoms are, but rather that a Christian who is sufficiently centered around faith and around their faith commitment and the commitments that they have for their own finances to do good in the world, that they may be able to weather some of these markets better than some of the greed-driven folks that are out there. And so that's definitely what I'm hoping to see.
Well, definitely, Alex. I know that's something that we can look forward to, is watching as our channel grows and we do draw more Christian viewers and they start to get more involved, we're very excited to be able to see that happen, because really that's what our channel is really. It's much more about the kingdom of God than it is about the kingdom of this world, right? We want to see people develop and mature and do well, prosper, but ultimately we want them to prosper in the kingdom of God, because that's really the place that Christians have an advantage over the general populace when they get involved in these types of markets, because we are aware that the future of this world is very uncertain. Not, the very end, the final outcome we know is certain because God has already told us what that will be. But until then, everything is very uncertain. And so we're aware of that, and we don't put our faith in that. What we do know is that when we put our faith in God, then our ultimate eternal future is certain. And that's the only certainty that we truly have. We don't have certainty in life, right? We never know which day is our last. We're all aware of that. Well, hopefully we are. We need to be aware of that. And, time is precious when you have time to spend with your loved ones and in your faith, being able to practice your faith. That's a wonderful thing, because you really never know whether, you'll have another day to do that. But also, sadly, in our world, sometimes, those freedoms can be taken away. And so you might have to practice your faith a lot more underground than that you're able to right now. So ultimately, that's the thing. We really want to be able to look to that ultimate future, have that certainty in that, and then what happens in this life, is much, much less important. It's really, when you can take that step back, have that perspective, then you can say, well, I have a little bit of money I can afford to lose, even if it just all was to vanish tomorrow. I wouldn't like it, of course, but go ahead, start to get involved and not be concerned or upset if things don't go the way you thought. And then if it does go well for you, then great. That's a good thing too. So that's really where, the Christian perspective is on that. And it's wonderful, really, like I said, because people who have that eternal perspective just aren't going to get caught up in the day-to-day, oh, my portfolio is soaring today, or oh, my portfolio is crashing. It's like, well, okay, we expect that's going to change. We don't know one way or the other. And it's great if it goes well. And if it doesn't, it's not going to, that's not the worst thing to happen either.
I really feel that way. I love to believe that faith is the antidote to the fear and greed that cause so many people to lose their shirts in the markets. So I certainly want to send a big shout out to our viewers and give them confidence in their faith and let them, encourage them to walk in faith as they move into this crypto space and explore it and learn how to participate in it. It's coming, and I want to make sure that all the right people are a big part of what's next in this world. So Rick, I want to say thanks again for a terrific show. It's always great meeting with you. I just love our conversations, and I'm so glad that we're able to put it out there where other folks can benefit from this. And I'll look very forward to our next Crypto for Christians show.
Great. Thanks, Alex. I certainly agree. And we'll see you all next time. God bless.